We had our glow sticks happening during that intro. Man, that was so much fun. Craig G hanging out with you here. This is Canadian AF, Canadian as fuck, this program that we do each and every Monday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on, of course, our radio station, which is called Revolution Radio Canada. Joined as always with my friends Dimitri, our man Scotty Comer, who is in Florida right now, hanging out in Florida, Durkee Wonderstone, a.k.a. Derek Lewis. I have no idea where he is right now. Our man Jonny Dovercourt has joined us one more time in the studio. Yes! Woo-hoo-hoo! Jonny Dovercourt, thanks so much for joining us again, my friend. We greatly appreciate it. And you have a report which is very, very important. We are going to talk to you about. We've got a lot of stuff to talk to you about as far as this guy goes. It's a fantastic piece, and I'm actually going to pull it up on the screen. Oh, sounds like our man Derek might be having some issues. Anyway, let's get our man Dimitri, please, if you wouldn't mind, a land acknowledgement.
Canadian as fuck would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet tonight on a virtual platform, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands we call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations, to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and cultures, and to try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration.
Brother, thank you so much for doing that. As always, we greatly appreciate it. We are going to be talking about this thing, which I am pulling up in PDF form here. It's just taken a quick second because apparently Google isn't fast or anything. We're going to be talking about this guy right here, and it's that. Does everybody see that? Can everyone see that?
Oh, this is way less fun when you shared the other thing.
It feels like you're in school.
When it covered people.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm not down with learning. Fuck this shit.
I pulled this thing up to prepare for this the last time we were going to do this, and it was like 95 pages. Like, in for a penny. I did it all, but it was like, what did I get into?
Wow, thanks for reading the whole thing. You could have just read the executive summary. That's why there's the 6 pages at the beginning.
See, I didn't know if I was allowed, being that I'm not an executive of anything.
Oh.
Yeah, so
touche.
I felt like a poser, yeah.
Also, Comer didn't really go to school, so he doesn't know that essays are usually written where you have everything at the beginning, and then there's a bunch of bullshit in the middle, and then a sum up in the end.
Well, I was homeschooled, so I was just told what a good,
I know,
good boy
with a belt.
I was. Yeah.
Homeschooled with a belt.
Yes.
So,
Okay. So anyway, why don't we
Dimitri doesn't
here?
like it when I'm rambunctious, so I'm going to rope it in.
Yeah,
tonight.
no, it's okay. No, never rope it in. Actually, we love it when you don't. So
I'm in the Matrix.
the last time our man Jonny Dovercourt was here, we were talking about, is everybody ready? I know the boys are ready to duck on either side. This book right there called Any Night of the Week. Jonny Dovercourt, DIY History of Toronto's Music Scene, 1957 to 2001. It is a fantastic read, and if you don't have it, make sure that you get yourself a copy of that book right there. And just so you
Dimitri's
know,
lost in
it's that right.
He's doing the Macarena behind the book. What's he doing?
So we chatted with our man Jonny literally just over a year ago right here on this very little program called Canadian AF when we joined our friends at Crier Media to essentially put our podcast out there. Jonny Dovercourt's episode was the very first episode we did with Crier. So we're so happy to have our man Jonny back. John, could you do us a favor and just kind of wondering if you could fill us in, if you could fill us in, Derek, I swear to God. You said you were going to fucking rope it in, okay?
So then you said don't.
We can
then you
actually.
said not to.
You're right.
To be fair, yes.
I absolutely did. Okay,
He feels like he's back in school. He can't help it.
That's right. Exactly.
Do the old artificial
wondering if
fat.
you'd be able to, if you could talk about essentially the beginnings of this paper. How did this report kind of come to be?
Well, I thought about doing a follow-up to Any Night of the Week, originally at the end of the week was going to be 2 books. So it was going to be one big fat book. I ended up cutting it in half. Then it came out at the start of the pandemic, and then I decided I didn't want to do another book because it took so long to write that book that I didn't want to spend another 4 years covering 2001 to the pandemic, because we wouldn't know how the story would end. And I decided I wanted to do something that was more forward-looking, like future-looking. And I was actually considering going back to school, having one of those, existential crises we were all having in the early pandemic. Like, what am I doing with my life? All the venues are shut down. I'm a concert promoter. And
I've felt that way since literally 1992. So I hear you.
So I about 10 years ago or so, I was invited to work on a report for the city of Toronto called From the Ground Up, which is actually a pretty early study about the Toronto's cultural sector, and it led up to the first culture plan, which I think came out a year or two later. And I met this really cool guy who's a sociologist from UT called Dan Silver, and he'd actually worked on one of the first reports that had the term music city in it. He's actually from the States originally, and he wrote this co-authored this Chicago music city study, and then he moved to Toronto, became a sociology prof. And so I was chatting with him, and he said, nah, don't go back to school. You have enough experience. He said, if you want to study something about music venues, let's do something together. So I was like, okay. So I got some funding from some grants. He brought in his time as a professor, and was also able to recruit some students. So we had this idea to do this research project looking into the future of live music spaces. It started as a Toronto thing, and then because of some of the grants we got, it actually became an Ontario-wide study. Yeah. So it was really cool. It was I brought my sort of journalistic flair to the table. Dan brought this really hardcore academic data analysis side of things. And, there's a lot of reports about, there's been a lot of reports in the last decade about the live music sector in Ontario. I think at one point we even do a meta-analysis of where we analyze all the other reports that have come up to ours. And a lot of them are, have a lot of interesting ideas, but they're a bit dry and not necessarily a good read. And, we wanted to do something that was a little more accessible and readable. It also had a bit of accountability to it, had a bunch of ideas that were really actionable. And then we'd actually sort of do some follow-up and see what can actually come of some of the ideas from this study. So that started. It actually took about a year or two to work. We started working on it in the fall of 2021, and we did a big audience survey. Well, it wasn't just audiences. We spoke to everyone across the whole music ecosystem. We spoke to musicians. We spoke to concert promoters. We spoke to venue owners and audience members. I went around to other cities around Ontario and interviewed people in their local music scenes, like in Ottawa and Guelph and Hamilton, which was actually really, really cool to get outside of the Toronto bubble and see what's happening in other places. We did some really cool, I know this is the last thing you're going to expect to hear is really cool data analysis, but for a phrase you never expected to hear on Canadian AF.
Oh, fun.
But get this, we actually did one of the first things anyone's ever done in the world, was we actually analyzed concert listings. We got Exclaim and Just Shows to give us their access to their database. And then we actually did analysis of all the concert listings in their database to do mapping and track the amount of activities and the location of venues and the trends over the course of a decade. Mm-hmm. So that was really, really innovative stuff. And we also, Dan and some of his other colleagues at UT, they actually downloaded all of the Yelp. Wow. And then we were able to analyze Yelp reviews of music venues and group them by keyword. To make categories of different types of venues, and then saw which of those types of venues survived the pandemic and which didn't. Yeah. So there was some really, really cool stuff. And then we did a lot of thinking and a lot of talking and okay, well, it's pretty clear what the problem is in live music. And we summed it up as market misalignment, which is basically audiences think they're paying too much for concert tickets, artists think they're not getting paid enough, and venue operators are seeing their costs go up consistently. So basically, like the economy for live music is basically broken, especially at the DIY emerging grassroots level. Like the big guys, they're doing fine, but it's the small spaces, the ones where the new bands, the beaches and metrics of tomorrow, where they get their start. Those are the places that really need the most support.
Yeah, and it's really detrimental there then.
Yeah. Pardon me?
It's really detrimental then, like all those sections that you're talking about that are missing for like all the lesser known people. That's that could possibly be devastating.
Yeah, exactly.
Years.
Yeah. But you have some suggestions.
Exactly. So we went from like outlining the problem. We didn't want it to just be another sort of big list of complaints. And talk about, we're losing all our venues. The sky is falling. We didn't want it to be that. We want it to be, okay, yes, there is a problem. There's a challenge in this ecosystem, but what are some like creative ways that like within Toronto and Ontario we can sort of work to create new models of venues that might be more able to withstand future pandemics or able to be more economically sustainable or even ecologically sustainable, and able to pay artists better when they're starting out, and to make it more accessible for different types of people to engage with live music, because so much of the music that we all love takes place in licensed bars and clubs, which often shut out families, shut out underage people, people who come from cultures that aren't used to being around alcohol. I like a drink. We're all having a drink here, but so much of the economics of live music is based around alcohol sales, which isn't necessarily the most like equitable or sustainable thing. So yeah, obviously a lot of it depends on like new and more robust forms of public support of government funding, but also we talked about other new funding models that might, like the idea of starting a foundation to support some of these ideas, to get more, to generate more private revenue, like the way all the symphonies and the operas and the ballets all have fundraising departments. Why can't there be a foundation that supports
100%
indie venues that raises donations from people who have more cutting edge taste in music, for example?
Yeah. So I wanted to, sorry, Dimitri, if you don't mind, I just want to jump in really quickly because I want to touch on something that Jonny opened with. When and where did the term for Toronto start as far as Music Town? Was it John Tory? Music City? Was it John Tory?
It actually goes back to, it was actually Ford era. But I mean, he didn't coin anything. I mean, I think that if you actually read this book, called "This Must Be the Place," which is kind of like this is like a really essential book about music policy. It just came out like a week after my report. It was actually really funny. Like it was, and the guy who wrote it's from Toronto. He's based in London, England. Shane Shapiro, but he's actually from Toronto. And I think that it was actually Music City was coined by a guy that he gives credit to in England is the guy that sort of coined the term, and then Shane was one of the people that popularized it. So it's actually not strictly a Toronto thing. It's something that's sort of became pretty popular around the world around 2013, 14, 15 or so. And Toronto was pretty early in sort of adopting the term Music City. But really it was popularized in London and in Melbourne and Berlin and Austin. Like, actually, I think it's actually, and then actually Nashville is the city that originally called itself Music City, USA. Music City, US. So actually it goes back to Nashville. But yeah, it became a sort of in the mid 2010s, it became a sort of way of putting music on the radar of policymakers, because previously no one cared about music. It was just like this thing that was out there, but there was no like kind of civic or policy recognition of its importance. So it's actually pretty new, even in the last decade, that people are even talking about this at city halls around the world, or the city hall in Toronto that we now have a music office that's been around for 10 years. But what's funny is that, like, since then, the last couple of years, the term's kind of fallen out of favor, which is why we use music ecosystem, which is, and even Shane himself, like he started a new charitable org called the Center for Music Ecosystems. Like even the guy who founded I wouldn't say he founded it, but he kind of popularized it. Even he's kind of moved away from it because it's a little reductive, right? Because music can happen anywhere. We say this in the report, like music, someone who's like making music in a village in Nunavut might not be in a city, but they're still part of a music ecosystem.
Well, what do you think of the work that the music office has done at Toronto City Hall over the past 10 years?
It's been slow. It's been a slow build. I think that it's taken a while. I think for Mike Tanner, I have a lot of respect for Mike Tanner and for Jacqueline Tam, who are the two staffers of the music office, and they've done a really great job. I think of getting to know the music community in a very organic way, and getting to know who all the people are, because it's such a big industry, such a wide industry. And Toronto City Hall is just such a strange, dysfunctional, glacial government. Like there's we had a meeting at City Hall to talk about the report last week, which was really amazing because there was a lot of interest at City Hall about how we could action some of the ideas in a report. But you definitely could tell that there's people from different departments that had never met, that don't talk to each other, that don't know what each other are doing. So it's been great to see someone like to see Mike and Jacqueline come together around things like the It's Okay studio in Queen as an example of like one of the real big wins of the music office was this space on Queen West that was a city-owned space that was a shoe store, like a sneaker shop next to the was the KFC, I think, or Taco Bell, like
right down
by Drom Taberna and Java House.
Java House.
Okay.
Like across the street from Java House, and then and then across the street the other way from Drom Taberna. And this is the city-owned space, and it was actually owned by Parks, Forestry, and Recreation, and it was due to be demolished because they're building a park there. And this 2-story space was vacant, and the city basically gave it over to a group called It's Okay, which is a Black-led collective that do sort of DIY events mostly with artists from like R&B and hip hop genres. But they started out doing events in weird spaces like concerts and boxing gyms and things like that. So they were given access to this space to at well below market rent to run it for 2 years before this building gets demolished. And it's not a traditional venue. It's sort of also a bit of a co-working space, a bit of a studio. So they only have sort of public events on a semi-regular basis. But it's a really exciting template for potentially the city really getting involved in actually making more space for people from the community, for DIY groups to run their own spaces. So that's the access to space is probably like the biggest issue for the arts in Toronto, and this is that's a really great example of it. I think really one win that the music office has had so far, and hopefully something they can replicate in other spaces.
And the report is very complimentary of Ottawa as a music city. And I was just like, what are some things that Ottawa is doing right that other cities in Ontario aren't?
I think that Ottawa has some really interesting venue spaces that are not traditional bars. Has a few of those as well. And Ottawa, it's not perfect. It has important spaces that close, like Zappa Bibelbrox closed down after many years. And I think Barrymore's closed too. But spaces like Arts Court are really interesting. Like Arts Court's a really, really special space that I think is pretty unique in Ontario, if not all of Canada. It's actually I feel like Toronto should go look at Arts Court and try and create a space like that here. It's basically what Artscape should be. Like the Arts Court building is an old city courthouse that the city of Ottawa just basically gave over to the arts community back in the 80s or 90s. And there's several groups that are all co-located there. Like the Fringe Festival has 2 theater spaces. There's a couple of different gallery spaces. The Ottawa Art Gallery is there. The Ottawa Arts Council is there too. And most importantly, there's a group called Saw Gallery who have a venue called Club Saw, which is really like it's like a 150, 200 cap venue. That's probably like the most active venue of that size in Ottawa. Like every promoter uses Club Saw. Club Saw actually has an indoor and an outdoor space. They have an outdoor courtyard like adjoining the club that they can use for shows in the summer. Yeah. There's really kind of a no equivalent to Club Saw or Arts Court in Toronto. And so Rachel Weldon, who runs a series called The Baser, which is kind of a little similar to my series Wavelength, though like they're younger, they're a lot more heavily equity focused than we are. Really, really, really pushing diversity in a really, really deep, meaningful way. And the Baser was started by Rachel Weldon, who became the music programmer at SAW. And Rachel had the idea of doing this whole building takeover at Arts Court and calling it Peak, like PIQUE. So it's kind of like a quarterly version of Nuit Blanche, like an all-night art party that takes over all the spaces of Arts Court with like lots of great music as well as lots of great art and dance performances and that sort of thing. So imagine if you had all of Nuit Blanche, but with all but with more of a music focus, but focus into one building once a season. And apparently that's like the coolest thing happening. I mean, Ottawa's so different, right? It's a lot smaller than Toronto, right? So when there's one really, really cool thing like that, the whole city goes to it. And the same with Blues Fest. Yeah. Blues Fest takes over. Yeah. I think that Ottawa, obviously it has a bad reputation, I think, for being kind of a boring government town. And obviously I think all of us have had that experience of going to Ottawa at like on a, 8 p.m., arriving in there at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday and everything's closed.
I was just recently there. I hated my existence. Yeah. It's like there's literally nothing to do. And there like for being the capital of like the nation of Canada, what a dump.
I see. I don't agree. I think that Ottawa has a beautiful public buildings. I love buildings. I do too. Like the National Gallery and the National Arts Center. And I mean, those are 2 that come to mind.
This is going to go to a completely different conversation. So we'll talk about music. Do that.
That's all right. But for the music scene, there's definitely like stuff that you have to sort of be in the know. And there's great parties like Timeco, which is going on for 15 years, like Pan-African DJs. Like they do stuff in Eritrean restaurants and warehouses. And there's obviously because there's not as much happening as in Toronto, and you sort of have to be a bit more in the know. But the local scene in Ottawa is very supportive of itself and has really figured out how to do these sort of connections with public institutions in a way. Maybe it's just like me, like I like that kind of thing. I like more art spaces than traditional bar party spaces, and I think they do that better. And the National Arts Center is actually an amazing building that's done a lot of community outreach through the 4th stage, and they have really successful festivals like Blues Fest. Yeah. So that's why I think Ottawa like sort of came out really, really, really well. And OMIC is really great too. Like the Ottawa Music Industry Coalition is a really example. Like there's no kind of Toronto equivalent of that. It's like not really a musicians union, but like a membership-based musicians association that anyone who's a musician in Ottawa can join, and then you can have access to all these benefits. Like they have that, which is more of a sort of community-based equivalent to, like in Toronto, we have the Toronto Music Advisory Council, which I should disclosure I'm joining. I have my first meeting with them on Wednesday after 10 years. But TMAC, the Toronto version is actually within City Hall. But with Ottawa, it's actually their equivalent is actually part of the community, which gives it a different feeling. Anyway,
given that Ottawa has a support for sort of the budding scene, who's come out of Ottawa?
Exactly.
Honestly, though, like I can't think of anything that sort of spawned.
The Hallucination or Tribe Called Red, Kathleen Edwards, like 2/3 of the guys from Metz, the drummer from the Arcade Fire, Bruce Coburn,
I've heard always call themselves an Ottawa band.
Oh, I mean, unfortunately, it's one of those things where people from Ottawa end up moving to Toronto or Montreal. In my Paul Anka, he's from Ottawa.
8 seconds, but it's
Shotmaker, for anyone, 90s hardcore band.
There you go. Okay, Shotmaker's from Ottawa.
There was a great
Morissette.
DIY hardcore post-punk scene in the 90s, like Shotmaker, Okara, Kepler.
I've played some
measures.
I've played some good punk shows in Ottawa, some good hardcore shows for sure.
Yeah. No, we were talking about like
the Wooden Stars.
Oh, there you go. You were saying that there's not a bunch of places for like emerging like younger people to play, and maybe people that aren't used to being around alcohol and stuff. Now this guy, my finger gets all blurred out. This guy above me, Mr. Comer.
Hi.
So I've been friends with Comer for forever, and there's a lot of things that Comer's produced, like bands that he's produced, that I have gone and seen through the late 90s into the 2000s, that were all playing in like these like what was it? Was it the Oak Room or the Pine Room?
Pine Room and Oak
Pine Room. The Burlington Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, the like all these places that I've seen all these all ages shows for all these bands, and they're just
in the suburbs for sure. Yeah.
In the suburbs, like it's happening. And I'm like, so like my brain is like I honestly, I didn't even think of it. And reading your paper, I'm like thinking back, and I'm like, you know what? There is absolutely nowhere in
When
Toronto.
When was the last time we played a all ages show? It's
you
crazy.
just played an all ages show.
I did for the first time, I swear, in 15 years, and that was in London at the Palisade, which is bowling alley. But
Scotty, what's your band called, Scotty?
The Scary Loud.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Is it punk rock?
It's sort of like Weezer, kind of power pop, that kind
fun.
of thing.
Yeah.
And then I was in a hardcore band called Twin Rivals that played a bunch too.
Oh yeah.
Just a straight like beat down hardcore band. But yeah.
I think in Toronto it was the closing of the Big Bop. That was kind of the pipeline for all ages shows, at least downtown, right?
Good call.
And I think like when that closed, that sort of pipeline for teen bands from around the GTA to come into the city and play was really sort of closed down. And I guess like the guy who was booking it, I think he went on to open the Rock Pile, which is out in Etobicoke. I think that, I mean, that's a little sort of out of my sphere of influence. But I think they still
Cloverdale Mall area.
Yeah, I think they do all ages shows.
They do all ages shows. It's a pain in the ass to get to.
Exactly, it is a pain for those of us who live downtown. Yeah. So that's it is definitely a void, right? In terms of like there's I don't know how many teenagers play in bands like these days. I mean, they for those who make music, there may be more urge to get into hip hop or DJing
it's resurging. These things are cyclical, right? So it's back to kids are into rock again. It seems
we were just talking with Craig about this a couple episodes back about the reemergence of like kids wanting to actually hold an instrument.
Yeah, it's expensive, but also all these things always come back, right? It's always.
Listen, I've looked at it this way. My daughter goes to School of Rock, and here in Markham, and she's literally like putting on her boots, and my daughter's a little goth, right? So she's just wonderful. She right now on her ceiling, she's got Chino from the Deftones and Peter Murphy.
Nice,
right?
That's what goth children want to hear. She's just
right,
great.
Exactly.
She's
so
adorable.
she's absolutely like throwing on her boots and running out the door to go to School of Rock because she's so excited to strap on her guitar and play with a band. Where at first she was really hesitant about it, and I was like, "Look, your daddy's a musician. I can tell you, there's nothing like getting in with a group of musicians and playing music together and kind of coming to this one place. It's like a bunch of guys running onto a lacrosse court, right, Scotty, or a hockey rink or something like that. So it's just the camaraderie that you
run on a hockey rink.
That you get from
you're gonna smack
thanks, Derek.
Head.
Thanks.
Right?
Thank you so much as always for
that. That's not the point, Derek.
Thanks.
Sorry.
So I had a couple of points that I wanted to bring up with Jonny, and hopefully Derek won't trounce on them.
Trounce.
So the first one, that I actually did want to ask you.
Yes.
One of the things that I loved about the report was the traveling stage that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
The stage truck.
So I think that's just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful idea.
Good for all ages too. Yeah.
I was talking,
Exactly.
all ages, 100%. I was talking with Derek too about this a little while ago. Derek was mentioning, I think the last time we spoke to you, actually, when we were talking about this book right here. There we go. So Derek was saying there's a stage at High Park. Right? So there's a stage at High Park. There's a stage, I believe there's one around. There's a hockey rink and a
we have a
like
bandstand. We have a bandstand in Kew Gardens.
Almost, yeah, exactly, a bandstand. And there's almost that kind of thing too, where it's like, I think it's almost like the Varsity Stadium with the seats that kind of go up, and like sort of from the deck. It's around, I think Bathurst and College. I think around the hospital.
Down by the skate park there.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think there's a stage down there. Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of like underused band shells and amphitheaters all around the city.
I know there's an open space down in. Sorry, I didn't mean to walk over you there.
No, that's
sorry.
okay.
I'm just thinking about places that there are, and I've played a few.
Think out loud. Go for it.
I know there's one in Dufferin Grove. It's not a bandstand, but there's a large open space that has been used as a bandstand.
Yeah.
There.
But again, these are underused. Why are they
100%?
Who
Because there's no power to them.
There's no basically because there isn't the really understanding within the Parks, Forestry and Recreation Department really doesn't understand how events work. They're starting to, and we had I'm glad they were at the meeting that we had last week, and they are very much now kind of in we are listening mode, which is great.
Okay, that's a start.
Because just for a long, just the rules around permitting for events is crazy in Toronto. I've only ever done one event in a city of Toronto Park my entire career as a presenter, and I vowed never again. It was such a nightmare. It's just so
really,
it's so difficult because there's just
miles of red tape kind of thing.
It's not even red tape. It's not even a lot of paperwork. It's just a lot of no's. It's just like, you can't do that. No, it's like you can't sell alcohol. You can't have it gated. You can't do it that day because there's soccer. We can't.
Governments are so good at ruining a good time. Aren't they? They're just so good at it.
I have a question about the traveling stage as it pertains to this. Then, do you not still have the same problems?
Exactly,
things like that.
You do.
But you have even less of a permanent stage in order to somehow have there's a little bit of infrastructure there for that. So how do you get around that kind of thing with the traveling stage? Because it seems like it's the same stuff.
It is the same stuff. So at least, keep in mind that this is an Ontario-wide report, so it's not just for Toronto. So other cities may not have, like in Hamilton, they may not have the same challenges. And I think like people in Hamilton are saying, "Ooh, we want to build the stage truck before Toronto does." But I think that it would have to go hand in hand with liberalizing or modernizing is the term they prefer, modernizing of the permitting rules. But it does give you sort of more flexibility in terms of location, and it also brings costs down because the other main, like there's the red tape barrier, there's the you can't do this barrier, but there's also the when it comes to outdoor concerts, the cost barrier is high. If you want to go beyond just busking, if you actually want to do professional presentation with good sound, it costs a lot of money. It usually costs at least 5 figures to do it properly. And then if you're in situations where you can't make money back from selling drinks, or you can't have it gated and sell tickets, then you're looking at having it funded by grants or sponsorship. Anything you can do to bring your costs down. Like the stage truck is like half the cost of renting a stage line or one of these big professional stages, or bring in all your stuff. Like with Wavelength, we used to like save money just by renting stuff from 5 different suppliers and building our own thing, and we'd save money, but it cost a lot more, took up a lot more time, and sweat equity to do outdoor stuff. So I think it's the idea of making it cheaper on top, in tandem with modernizing the bylaws. But it also opens up the whole city. Like there's I think the other thing too, if you look at the part of the study where the Toronto section which shows you like the mapping of venues and shows around the city, like everything was clustered downtown.
Yeah,
it really is
live music. Like all the inner suburbs are just starved for entertainment.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit of the idea of like, rather than someone trying to build open a brick and mortar venue in somewhere like Scarborough where there may not be the audience for it, the stage truck is the idea of more of this sort of a one-off intervention. Like if you can get a permit to do something in, say, like Morningside Park at Kingston and Morningside, it's beautiful. All this beautiful green space exists in other parts of the city, and that starts to create more of a demand for live music in parts of the city where you can't see it anywhere.
Okay, so initially with the roaming stage, I sort of thought it was a little more impromptu, but it can't quite be because of things like that. But
it could be in private space, right? It could be like it doesn't, like public parks aren't the only place where it can go, right? You could roll it up in a parking lot. You could
roll up on a beach, like you have a picture of it, like
street festival shutdowns.
Exactly.
And, street, and it's great for it would be great for street festivals because they spend a lot of money on staging and
even just private property, like someone's giant land outside of the city, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. There's so like much potential
brother's
for
place.
It. Yeah.
So you had another suggestion about a cultural land trust.
Yes, land trust.
Would you be able to tell us about the cultural land trust?
Okay, well, the cultural land trust is building on this, and then we're going to get because Derek, we're really going to go back to school here, and
Derek's like, no,
I got to get more beer.
I may get some details wrong, but hopefully no one facts
like high school.
me. But so the community land trust is basically very much a thing in affordable housing circles. Very much a community land trust actually goes back to the 60s. There's like an African American founded innovation for farmers who wanted to own their own land collectively. And it's basically the idea of collective ownership of land and buildings. So that if you rent an apartment on a community land trust, your rent will be locked in for perpetuity. You don't have any fear of getting evicted. It's wonderful, right? It really is this wonderful way of fighting against the capitalization of housing. And I won't get too much into the mechanics of how it works. But basically, it's a nonprofit. It's set up as a nonprofit trust and it has sort of community membership, some government membership, some resident membership. And then the idea is you take that and you apply that to a building with a cultural purpose. And this is still very, very new. Like the cultural land trust there's only a handful of them around the world. But basically, if you apply it from the thinking of a music venue, like the biggest thing that we hear about all these venues closing, right? And like 90% of the time, it's because they've had their rent. They've either had their rent raised or they're getting a demo evicted to make way for a tower.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the idea of the cultural land trust is a long-term protection from the rental market. So if you were renting a space in a cultural land trust, you would not have that worry looming over your head of, when am I going to get kicked out for a KFC or a condo?
Are you glad that you didn't go back to school?
Yes and no. Right. I mean, like I love the independence that I have right now. And, I think that the academic environment is kind of it can be a bit of a stressful place, I think, right now. For many reasons. I think that, in terms of like what I'm going to do next, like I think it would either be probably starting the foundation that I outlined in the report, or working for a city. I think that,
and then you joined that music advisory council, right?
Yeah.
That's
volunteer. That's volunteer though.
Okay. Well, okay. But see, cool. School would have cost you money.
School would have cost me money. Exactly. I want to get paid. School would have cost me. That was my metric. That was my calculus. I was like, I don't want to have to pay to end up doing what I'm already doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So obviously you've sat down at City Hall, or you've presented at City Hall. Have you done a similar thing with the Ontario government?
No, that would be great. That would be next on the list. But assembling that list of stakeholders is going to be a bit of a challenge. I'm open to suggestions on who to talk to. But the Ford government, they
not that fucking dickhead.
They don't want to. I mean, they do. The thing is, everyone likes music, right? And with the Ontario Place debacle, they definitely need some good PR. So, I would be open to it for sure.
I think it should happen. Absolutely. 100%. Because I think, we talking about just venues kind of all over the place. One of the things that I missed being a musician and a DJ in the 90s and the 2000s, there was a great club, perfect example, that I don't know exists anymore, because unfortunately I'm kind of out of the whole club thing. But there was a club that was down Queen West, just a little west of Bathurst. It was called Gypsy Co-op.
Yes.
And Gypsy Co-op was just this wonderful, wonderful space. It had a candy shop in the front, and in the back it had kind of a DJ booth and a restaurant with amazing food. And upstairs, no, it's not there anymore, unfortunately. It was owned by the great DJ Gio Cristiano, and a few other people. And upstairs they had just a live venue with a very small stage, but an unbelievable sound system. It was called the Hooch. Mm-hmm. And the Hooch used to have this band every Tuesday night with my old buddy Randy Cook, who's just a phenomenal Canadian drummer who's down in LA now. It used to be called King Brand Valium, and they used to play every Tuesday night at the Hooch. They would do essentially live house music. I'm wondering, with the state of clubs these days, do you think we would ever see anything like what we saw back in the days of a Queen Street West, or even bigger, the Entertainment District, where there's 30 nightclubs in the space of 8 city blocks? Do you think that could ever happen again? Maybe not in Toronto, but elsewhere?
That's a good question. I think that I think it's possible. I think that Toronto is just getting so spread out. And those sort of affordable places are just becoming more and more far flung. Mm-hmm. So I think that it might have to be the kind of thing that's less organic and maybe more intentional. Maybe someone picks a street, picks this. Geary Avenue is already Geary has already happened, but what would the next Geary Avenue be like? There's actually this street that I have my eye on that's up north of the Junction. I think it's called McCormick. Mm-hmm. And it's this wild little semi-industrial street. It definitely looks like Hamilton a little bit.
It's all the industrial on one side and then the brown houses on the other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Somewhere like that, I think, maybe if the city was saying, okay, we're gonna build a cult, we're gonna help develop or encourage a cultural district along this street, for example, and create sort of some incentives or tax breaks for a bunch of venues to pop up here.
Do you think it's genre based a little bit, the difference between the past and now too? How do I explain this? If everybody was kind of listening to the same stuff or thereabouts the same stuff, you could have a district that had a bunch of stuff so that it was adjacent to that sort of thing. But everybody's listening to different stuff. We've got different cultures.
And that makes a scene harder to start, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. I guess that's what I'm getting at. So how do you start you could start a scene for a scene.
But you could say the same thing about the 90s, you know, like you had Gypsy Co-op was acid jazz, like acid jazz places right next to goth clubs and punk places and dance clubs. Like
each genre would have its thing in that area.
Like in the club district, there was Whiskey Saigon was kind of like a rock / kind of dance club, and across the road you had Tonic Nightclub, which was literally strictly hip hop and house. Yeah, and that's all that they played. And down the road you could have like My Apartment, which was literally just all college kids listening to anything from Spirit of the West to, you know, Tupac and Biggie, right? So
I liked My Apartment. Yeah,
it was a fun place, a lot of fun. It was great. Yeah, I DJ there.
Like even the classic Queen West venues of like there, you know, like even what you would see at the Rivoli and the Horseshoe and the Bamboo and the Cameron was pretty diverse. You know, like they weren't like. Not even one of the, I wouldn't even say one of those venues was genre specific. Like we might think of the of the Bamboo as being like a reggae club, but they booked soul, they booked jazz, they booked funk,
everything.
They booked like weird, like, you know, Glenn Branca played there, like weird noise guitar.
so you wouldn't be building a scene in the area so much as you'd be building a space for a bunch of scenes to all be in the same sort of area.
Yeah, but I think that I think you're like. I think you want to encourage or embrace like how omnivorous people's tastes are now. Like everyone, like people's tastes are way more diverse. I think that it was definitely more tribal, I guess is the word. It's maybe not an appropriate word anymore, but in like back in the day, it was definitely more cliquey. People are definitely more open to going out and having different experiences and listening to a wider range of things.
We're exposed to more these days too, I guess. That's why.
Yeah. Okay. But do you think that like it all goes back, or a lot of this goes back to the late 90s when Sean Fanning created file sharing through Napster, and we've had a couple decades after that where basically recorded music has gotten completely devalued. Yeah. And so therefore like you talk about that in this report, there's a disconnect between the audience and like they think, oh, music is going to see live music is so expensive. Yeah. And then but then you have like you have musicians say, I need to play live in order to make any type of money because Spotify is paying me nothing, you know, and like it's all on playing live and selling merch, which is part of the live experience. Yeah. So don't you think that that's kind of the big conundrum here, or like at the heart of the conundrum is that like we have an audience that thinks, oh, well, music should be free. Mm-hmm.
And audiences are clearly willing to pay hundreds of dollars to see artists they know. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Like that's like the Bud stage, I think, had like a record summer. Budweiser stage, you know.
Wouldn't doubt it, yeah. I was there twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, for Weezer and Arctic Monkeys, yeah. Yeah.
But you know, these little 100 capacity bars are, half empty.
Yeah.
We also have more to do now. We have more to do at home.
Exactly.
Like back then it was like, I'm bored. Let's go out and find a club.
Well, totally. When we started Wavelength, they were like, what do we do after The Simpsons on Sundays?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of sad. I mean, but like you got a lot of great suggestions in this report, and I'm hoping that like this report stokes a fire under some government people's butt.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, and I appreciate you saying that. And I think that like government they're now listening. Well, some of them are listening, and they want to be partners, but. The change also we say this at the end of the report, like the change also has to come from the community. Like the people who care about the music scene, whether it's the fans, whether it's the musicians, whether it's the, presenters, we also the change has to come from us being more entrepreneurial and more supportive, like through philanthropic donations, and whether it's voting with your dollars or donating to organizations that are supporting the cause, supporting what you want to see happen within the music community. Like the government can't do everything for us. Like they can't wipe our butts. It's basically
Right, yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like they're there to they should be there to help us.
Yeah.
Not stand in our way, but they're not. The governments aren't going to fix the music scene for us.
Okay,
Derek,
definitely not wipe our butt.
So I've got I have a question for Derek in just a second, but I know Derek's got something here.
Which one is Derek?
That's the guy with the beard,
Yep.
Oh,
isn't it? Is it
I
that
see
guy?
his name there. No,
Go.
Okay,
come on,
it's my turn.
That's my fault.
Yeah, shut up, Comer. With reading your report, Johnny, and the conversation that we just had, especially what Dimitri just said and what you just said about how the promoters and people have to be more entrepreneurial and stuff in that regard. I think. Because back in the 80s and back in the 90s, because we're that old, and into the 2000s, there was like we had Queen Street. Right?
Yes.
Like speaking specifically of Toronto. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we had Queen Street, we had Dundas, we had College. Okay?
Yes.
we had Richmond too.
And Richmond, yeah.
Richmond was more like Richmond was a lot of like dance club kind of.
Yeah, it was
Like
that was
it was different. It was different.
Too, yeah.
It was there.
Where are you going with this, Derek?
Where I'm going with this is those people that own those venues and own those buildings prior.
Yeah.
Right. It's a lot of older people. They were a lot of older people. Those people don't exist anymore. And the people that have taken over those buildings are looking at dollar figures from big companies rather than looking at what their predecessors looked at, where they had the venues and they had the music. And because the music means people are going to come, people are going to spend money, people are going to buy beer, people are going to buy burgers, right? Mm-hmm. So that put asses in seats. You don't have the same mentality anymore, right? Because big box stores are like a guaranteed income. Right. If Le Chateau puts in and knocks out 3 stores and builds a superstore, you're guaranteed income for X amount of years.
But that's also because the Le Chateaus are the only ones that can afford the rent.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That's the thing. Like the rent has just gone up so much.
That's what I mean, right? Like because those venues have changed hands.
Like that's why those streets aren't what they used to, especially Queen West. Like I really am more in that like that strip of Queen West between Bathurst and the park and Trinity Bellwoods was the coolest place in 1994. 100%. And now there's nothing there unless you want to go buy sunglasses.
But the reason it was the coolest strip in the city was because of the music venues that were there, because of the people that came there, because of the money that went through the place. That's why those places were so huge. Yeah. That's why those places are so sought after, and that's why they come in and ruin the fuck out of it.
Yeah, and that's the cycle of gentrification, right? It's like it always sucks for the artists, the ones who develop these areas, make them turn them around. Like it's usually artists or entrepreneurs who open venues in areas that are cheap because they're like, hey, I can get for the same amount of money, I can get a bigger space to have more, get in more people, make more money, as long as people are willing to take their risks to go a little bit further.
Yeah, that's like what they did in New York in the 1970s. They started going to places like the Bronx and outside.
Look at York.
Tell me what you see about McCormick, because I live there. You mentioned that McCormick, that area. That's actually where my house is.
On that street?
I'm on Cayuga, which is just like 2 north of that.
Like, I just want to make sure we're talking about the same area, like just like north of St. Clair and Kiel, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Right north.
I just in the summer, I went to that Department of Civilian Dance had their big event there in one of the warehouse spaces on the south side of the street, where there was, it's just, I hadn't been to an event like that in Toronto in so long, where it was a big warehouse that was
right across from that school, right? There's
a school across the street.
Yeah, there's events there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know what's happening with it now. I heard that maybe that might not be a space anymore, but yeah, it was very like just it felt very, what's the word I'm looking for? Just kind of lawless in a good way, like just like there was they had an outdoor patio, and they had a school bus with art installation.
There's junkyards right next to it, but it's also in my neighborhood, which is just such a strange thing. Does this get around
your
the
house
thing
is
Derek
weird?
It is. Is this get around the thing Derek's talking about as far as like are these new areas then to be the new, not Queen Streets, but the new thing for venues and things like that?
Well, I think that's the thing, right? Because they're spaces that are a little bit further out from the core. I mean, the thing is, like, the whole city has kind of exploded in terms of property value. So, like, they might be cheaper, but maybe not as cheap as Queen Street was in the 90s, even with accounting for inflation. So,
and I guess probably a lot of those places too, Jonny, as well, you'd probably at least have to have some sort of like transportation infrastructure as well too. Right?
Absolutely.
So people to be able to get
of
in
which
and out
Toronto
of those venues
has
as well.
zero.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure what it's like at Keele and St. Clair, but I certainly know Queen Street was simple. I mean, you literally hopped on a streetcar and you were at the subway. And,
there's a St. Clair streetcar.
Yeah,
True.
Well, the thing is, you mentioned that's one of the things that the report said about Ottawa is that if everything isn't so concentrated in one part of the city. Yeah, there are things to do it's more spread out.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The thing is, so it was great that Toronto once had this Queen Street West scene. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, maybe it's not so bad that something can happen in McCormick, that something can happen in the East End, that something could happen in North York.
Exactly. That's sort of because there's residential development happening everywhere, right? There's going to be people in, say, like that area in the Junction or in the surrounding areas that are looking for things to do in their backyard. And especially as as the traffic gets so bad in the city, and the TTC takes longer and longer to get around the city. We might become more like, God forbid, Ottawa, where it's easier to go out in your neighborhood. Like, that's what we saw with the Ottawa research, is that because the Ottawa's downtown, I think to begin with is a little, kind of businessy and boring, that people would that you would see venues pop up in the Glebe or Centertown.
Yeah, definitely.
Montreal's like that too, isn't it?
Hintonburg, right? Like these. People
Montreal definitely, yeah.
Ottawans go downtown to work and then come home after work and then go out. Don't go back downtown. They stay in their neighborhoods at night.
Yeah.
There's stuff in the Glebe.
I was trying to overtalk you, but Montreal's much like that too. Like, they've got like little pockets of like, there's this little district and that little district, and
yeah, exactly.
I have a question for you, Jonny. So we always appreciate your time, as always, my friend. Like, again,
and I appreciate you.
We've chatted now for an hour, and literally I could chat to you for another hour.
We haven't mentioned history once.
I guess. Yeah. No, that's cool. I think here's a question I've got for you. After doing this report, this might be a bit of a broad question, but I'm wondering, after doing this report, do you have hope?
I do, actually, but I feel like there also needs to be. I think there still needs to be so much more education done on like how things work, on how especially at every level, like government level, corporate level, developer level, and at the sort of fan level too, and even at the musician level. Like, people need to
promoters,
know,
everything,
how the gears turn and why like the economics are so backwards and why it's important. Like, it's not, the support that's required to really have a vibrant music scene that develops our future beaches and our future metrics, like, takes investment, whether that's government funding or whether that's sponsorship or whether that's philanthropy, and that's okay. And that doesn't mean it's like, it's like, why should these little grimy musicians be getting government getting taxpayers money? Like, that sort of attitude seems to be. There's still a lot of that kind of attitude of it's like it's not worthy of our support. Until it gets to the point where it's making money, like that sort of.
Abel's Foundation does that, does it? Like, The Weeknd, he's got that. Abel, Weeknd, he's got that foundation down in Toronto, where he's like, it's a full arts building where he talks about from the high ups to the DIY kind of stuff. And it's I can't remember the name of it to save my life at the moment.
Yeah, we need more people like that. We need more pop stars with a conscience, like The Weeknd, and for people to listen to him. So I am optimistic because I think that there's obviously this report really struck a nerve. Like people really responded to it. I had tons of media, tons of conversations. I've had the 2 weeks after it came out, my days were packed with coffee meetings. Everyone wanted to talk to me. That was really nice, and I do really feel optimistic about what can happen next. But then it's also still so much work to do, so I feel a little oh my gosh, there's still so much to do to get where we wanted to get,
So what can we do? So I'm a music producer of bands. I'm in a band, and I've put on shows. What can we do at our level to help this? What happens from here?
That's a great question. Well, if we start the Ontario Space for Music Foundation, you'll be hearing from us, and then there'll be lots of ways to get involved.
Nice.
I think in the short term, I think it's important to participate in everything you see, any sort of survey that the city puts out about noise bylaws, about the music scene, about the importance of the music sector. Take part in that. Message email your local councillors and your MPPs and tell them that you want to see the support music venues in your backyard, and that you want to see more support, financial support for live music. That's big, because we're going into a scary time. All this pandemic funding that was rolled out to get the live music sector back on its feet is all getting cut back to pre-pandemic levels.
Mm-hmm.
But with post-pandemic inflation, you're going to see a lot. You're going to see a lot of festivals and venues folding and closing in the next year. So, it's
you said you were optimistic.
I'm optimistic,
bastard.
I quit.
And then you dropped that.
I didn't say I wasn't scared. I'm optimistic, but I'm also scared.
Okay.
Optimism also has to come with a dose of realism too.
Exactly.
Reality, yeah, absolutely.
It's not binary, right? So you can be optimistic about change, but also scared for the future, right? It's it's because we're dealing with big scary things all the time, like climate change. You have to be an optimist, but also recognize that it's fucking scary.
It's a hoax. It's a hoax,
and be willing to do the work.
Exactly.
Right. Guys, anybody have anything else before we
just to say thank you. Thank
Derek,
you.
that was just
thank you again for your time.
Oh, my pleasure.
Good, Jonny. Honestly, we just love having you on the show. We really do. Just your wealth of knowledge is
super smart,
staggering. Dude. It's staggering in a lot of ways. But no, honestly, we really appreciate it, because one of the things that I love is when you're talking about all of these things, you can see the passion that you have for it, and the love and the joy that clearly music brings you, and obviously brings everybody else here on this panel.
I think he's on ecstasy.
It might be. And Jonny, I've got some ideas, and I messaged Comer while we were talking, because you were talking about the stage, and I was like, I have this idea. I have this exact idea. So I'm gonna get. I have your email, so I'm just gonna get to emailing you, and I want to actually strike up a conversation about that, and I want to see where I can help out and what I can do with that.
Hell yeah, let's do it. I look forward to chatting about that, Derek.
Yeah, man.
Awesome. Jonny Dovercourt is, of course, the author of this wonderful book, which is right here. You'll be able to see it on screen. And, of course, the boys have to go on either side of it. Any Night of the Week by Jonny Dovercourt is available, and you can get it at your favorite bookstore, online bookstore, wherever you get it. Got my copy. Dimitri has his copy. Of course, he's lost behind the book. I think I'm actually going to put this up now once a show.
And Reimagining Music Venues, the report, you can download it for free.
Yep.
From wavelengthmusic.ca.
It's
a good hefty read
here for you, and I'm just going to share this if everybody can see that. So there it is, right there, and
you'll
let's go through it. Let's go through it page by page.
Absolutely. 90
Jonny,
pages,
you read the first phrase,
That's right. So here it is. It is right there, wavelengthmusic.ca. So again, Jonny, thank you so much for hanging out. With us,
My pleasure.
Greatly appreciate it.
Great to chat with you guys. Have
You're an awesome
night.
dude. You're an awesome dude,
Super
and
fun.
we just love you. So thanks a lot.